My parents faked cheating proof and blew up my wedding in front of 200 guests. Mom said I was an ungrateful brat. Dad called my fiancée a gold digger. Now they're blowing up my phone begging me not to cut them off forever 3 weeks ago. My parents stood up in front of 200 people at my wedding reception and destroyed my life. Not by accident. Not in a tense family moment kind of way. They planned it, down to the timing, the props, the fake man they hired to play the role of my fiancée's secret lover. When my father raised his glass that night, I thought he was about to give a normal father of the groom speech. Something awkward, maybe controlling, but tolerable. Instead, he and my mother accused my bride, the love of my life, of cheating on me in front of everyone we knew. With evidence. Screenshots, text messages, photos, all of it fabricated. They humiliated her, executed her character, in front of our families, her co-workers, her childhood friends, my colleagues. And they did it with cold precision while smiling. I didn't even recognize my parents that night. They stood there, calm and righteous, acting like they were saving me from some con artist who had trapped me into marriage. The air in that room turned heavy and strange. People didn't know if they should sit down or leave. My wife, Claire, sobbed so hard she couldn't breathe. Her father had to help her stand. I just stood there frozen, watching my mother wave her phone around, reading aloud texts that never existed. They'd ruined everything. Our vows, our celebration, our families, just to make a point. But it didn't start that night. It started 2 years earlier when I brought Claire home for dinner. Back then, I still thought I could reason with them. That if I loved someone good enough, kind enough, they'd finally stop treating my life like a business deal. I thought wrong. Because what I didn't know then was that my parents, Patricia and Howard, had already decided Claire wasn't our kind. And they were willing to go further than I ever imagined to make sure the wedding never happened. Looking back, there were warning signs everywhere. The calls, the guilt trips, the weird rumors my father kept dropping, the uninvited check-ins, the lies that started small, like seeds they knew would grow if they just watered them with fear. I just didn't realize how far they'd take it. Not until that moment at the reception, when my father looked me dead in the eye and said, "We had to do this, son. You wouldn't listen. We couldn't let her destroy you." And then he raised his glass to the room and said, "To the truth." That's when everything broke. The venue manager tried to intervene. Claire's family was shouting. My father looked triumphant. And my mother? She just kept crying and saying, "You'll thank us one day." That's when I finally understood the truth. They didn't just hate Claire. They hated the idea of losing control of me. But the part that still keeps me up at night? This wasn't the first time they'd done something like this. I didn't find that out until much later, after everything burned down. Because this story doesn't end with a ruined wedding. It ends with revenge. And I made sure they'd never be able to destroy anyone's life again. The night I brought Claire home for dinner was the start of everything. It was spring 2 years before the wedding, and I still believed my parents could change. I told myself they were just protective. I was 30, old enough to know better, but still stupid enough to hope. Claire was the first woman I'd ever loved without reservation. She was grounded, funny, brutally honest in a way that made me better. She didn't care about my last name, or that my parents lived in a house that looked like a real estate ad for greed. She just cared about me. My parents, Patricia and Howard, had always seen the world in layers. There were our kind of people, and then there was everyone else. Howard managed a successful car dealership in Hartford, Connecticut, but acted like he was royalty. Patricia was a former socialite who hadn't worked a day since the 90s but loved to talk about legacy. Claire's father, Tom, runs a small construction company. Her mother, Diane, teaches middle school English. My parents treated that like an insult. That first dinner, Patricia asked Claire questions like she was conducting an FBI interview. "How much does your father's company make annually? Did you go to college on scholarship or full tuition? Are you religious?" I wanted to disappear. Claire stayed polite but firm, even laughed once, which Patricia hated. After dinner, my mother cornered me in the kitchen. "She's ordinary," she said, like it was a diagnosis. "You could do better." I remember saying, "Better means what, Mom?" Richer. She didn't answer. That night, I got the first warning shot. Call from my dad. Your mother's worried. You're rushing into something, he said. Girls like that see opportunity in men like you. Girls like that. That phrase would haunt me later. Over the next few months, the campaign began. Small things at first. Articles my mom would send about young marriages that failed. My dad dropping comments like, "You sure she's not after stability?" They met my doubts with calculated guilt. "We're just trying to protect you, Jacob. Don't be naive, son." When Claire and I got engaged 6 months later, the masks dropped. Patricia didn't congratulate me. She said, "You'll regret this." Howard shook my hand like it was a business negotiation he'd lost. They said they'd help with the wedding costs, 30% of the total. Claire didn't want their money. She said it would come with strings. I insisted, thinking it would be a peace offering. Turns out it was the rope they planned to hang us with. From that point on, everything we did was under surveillance. Patricia inserted herself into planning. Howard wanted control over the guest list. They argued about the venue, the catering, even the napkin color. And then came the lies. 2 months before the wedding, Patricia called me crying. Said she'd seen Claire with another man at a cafe on the other side of town. When I asked for proof, she claimed her phone battery died before she could take a photo. When I told Claire, she showed me her work calendar and text logs. She'd been in a meeting all afternoon. That's when I started to realize my parents weren't just concerned. They were building something. A case. A narrative. A way to destroy the wedding before it ever happened. Then my father started calling Claire's parents directly, telling them he was worried about Jacob's future. Tom called me furious. Said if my dad called again, he'd show up at their door. I confronted my dad. He just said, "We're doing what parents should do when their son is being deceived." It was that word again, deceived. Like Claire was a con artist, and they were detectives on a holy mission. Then, 3 weeks before the wedding, my mother crossed the line completely. She showed up at Claire's apartment while I was at work. Told her to her face that she was marrying above her class, and that I'd eventually see her true colors. Claire recorded it. I still have that audio saved on my phone. The calm cruelty in Patricia's voice is something I'll never forget. I wanted to ban them from the wedding right then. But Claire said, "Let's try one more time. Maybe if they see us together, they'll stop fighting it." She was wrong. Because when we sat down with them for that dinner, the peace dinner, as I called it, they were already plotting the public execution of our wedding day. The night we met my parents for a peace dinner, I still believed there was a version of the story where everyone walked away civil. I wanted so badly to believe they were just stubborn, not evil. We met at this overpriced steakhouse downtown. Patricia's choice, obviously. She showed up dressed like she was meeting royalty. Howard wore his dealership suit, the one he uses to impress new clients. They both hugged Claire like they were auditioning for sainthood. We sat down, ordered wine, and for 10 minutes it almost felt normal. Then Patricia started with her smile. Tight, polite, poisonous. "So, Claire, I heard you're still working at that nonprofit school?" she asked, like she was talking about a failed investment. Claire nodded. "Yeah, I love it. The kids are amazing." Patricia smiled wider. "That's sweet. Most women your age are thinking about, stability by now." Howard laughed like she'd made a joke. I wanted to flip the damn table. Claire stayed composed, said, "I'm stable enough to know who I am, Mrs. Whitman." The look Patricia gave her could have frozen air. Dinner went downhill fast. Every time Claire talked, Patricia interrupted. Howard kept bringing up marriage statistics, divorce rates, prenups. He even suggested we delay the wedding until everyone's sure. When Claire asked, "Everyone?" he didn't answer. By dessert, Patricia was crying. "We just don't want Jacob hurt. We've seen what happens when men marry the wrong woman." I said, "Mom, she's not the wrong woman. She's the person I chose." Patricia wiped her tears like an actress and whispered, "You'll see. I just hope it's not too late." That was it for me. I paid the bill, told them if they couldn't respect Claire, they shouldn't come to the wedding. Howard's jaw clenched. "If you cut us out, you'll regret it, son." I said, "Not as much as I'll regret keeping you in." Then we left. For the next 2 weeks, radio silence. No calls. No texts. It was peaceful, too peaceful. Claire said maybe they'd finally decided to let it go. I wanted to believe her. Then, 5 days before the wedding, Patricia called. Her voice was small, trembling, so different it scared me. "Jacob," she said, "your father and we've been awful. We want to make things right. Please let us be there. We just want to see you happy." I don't know why I believed her. Maybe because I needed to. She swore they'd behave. Swore they just wanted to celebrate our love. Even my brother, Matt, who had stayed neutral, said they sounded sincere. Claire didn't trust it. She said, "They don't apologize. They reposition. There's a difference." But I caved. I told them they could come, but one wrong move and they'd be out. The wedding day came and it was perfect at first. Claire was radiant. My friends were laughing. Even Patricia and Howard were quiet in the front row. For the first time in years, I actually relaxed. The ceremony ended beautifully. We danced, ate, took photos. I looked at Claire and thought we made it through the storm. Then, right before we were supposed to cut the cake, I heard the sound that still makes my stomach drop, the clinking of my father's glass. He stood up with a microphone, smiling like he'd just closed the biggest sale of his life. Patricia was next to him, clutching her phone. "Before we toast," Howard said, "there's something important our son deserves to know." The room went silent. Patricia said, "We didn't want to do this, but we can't let our son start his life based on lies." And then she started reading. Fake text messages, fake conversations, fake love notes, all supposedly from Claire to some man named Evan. Guests gasped. Claire went pale. I felt my pulse in my throat. Then Howard said, "And because we believe in truth, we've invited Evan here tonight." A man I'd never seen before stepped forward from the crowd. He looked nervous but rehearsed. And that's when my world ended. I remember every second of it like a freeze frame in my mind. Howard's voice booming through the microphone. Patricia's tears glistening under the chandelier. 200 faces turning toward us. Half confused, half horrified. And Claire, my wife, standing next to me, trembling so hard I could feel it through her hand. The man claiming to be her secret lover, Evan, walked up to the mic. He looked about mid-30s, clean-cut, nervous, but too confident to be improvising. He said, "I'm sorry, Jacob. I didn't want to ruin your day, but she's been with me for months. She told me she was marrying you for financial stability." Gasped. Someone dropped a glass. Patricia's voice cut through the chaos. "We begged her to come clean, but she wouldn't. We couldn't stay silent any longer." Claire choked out, "This isn't true. I don't even know this man." Her mom, Diane, was on her feet instantly, yelling, "This is insane. You're sick." Her dad, Tom, was already moving toward Howard, pure fury in his eyes. I was frozen. My brain just stopped processing. All I could think was my parents wouldn't. They couldn't actually, but when I looked at the evidence, everything clicked. I work in IT security. I know fake screenshots when I see them. The message bubbles were mismatched. The timestamps were impossible. Some referenced things that never even happened. And yet there they were, blowing them up on a projector for the entire room to see. Texts that made my wife sound like a manipulative sociopath. Patricia kept reading, "You're the only one I love, Evan. I just need to get through the wedding so I can get access to his family money." The crowd murmured. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Claire screamed, "Those are fake," and grabbed the mic. Her voice cracked as she said, "My husband's parents made this up. They hate me because I'm not rich enough for them." People started shouting over each other. The DJ stopped the music. My father smirked, like the chaos was proof he was right. I walked up to Evan. "Where did you meet Claire?" I asked. He hesitated. At a bar downtown." "Which bar?" I pressed. He blinked. O'Malley's?" Claire's face twisted. "I've never even been there." Then I asked, "What does she do for work?" He said, Marketing. She teaches 5th grade. He didn't even know her job. You're lying, I said. Who paid you? That's when the man's eyes flickered toward my father. Just for a second, but enough. I turned to Howard. You hired him? He didn't answer. Patricia's face was wet with fake tears. You're being manipulated, Jacob. Can't you see? Tom lunged forward. Diane screamed. You've humiliated my daughter on her wedding day. Everything blurred, voices shouting, crying. The photographer dropped her camera. The videographer stopped recording. Some guests were already leaving. I grabbed my father's phone from his hand and shoved it toward him. You destroyed everything, I yelled. He didn't even flinch. Just said, we saved you. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I turned to the entire room and shouted, those messages are fake. My parents made this up because they can't stand that I married someone who doesn't fit their sick little fantasy of perfection. Half the crowd believed me, half didn't, but it didn't matter anymore. The damage was done. Claire was sobbing in her wedding dress, her makeup ruined, her hands shaking. She whispered, let's go home. We left without cutting the cake, without dancing, without saying goodbye. That night, she fell asleep crying in our hotel room while I sat in the dark, replaying every second. And that's when I realized something that chilled me to the bone. This wasn't just sabotage. This was a campaign. A full-blown operation to erase Claire from my life. And they weren't done yet. The morning after the wedding, the sun came up like nothing had happened. The sky was bright, people were eating breakfast, and my wife was curled up next to me, silent, staring at the wall. Her eyes were swollen. She hadn't spoken a full sentence since the night before. The wedding that should have been the happiest day of our lives had been turned into a live-streamed humiliation. I checked my phone and saw 12 missed calls from my parents. No apology, just one text from my father. You'll thank us one day. That's when I stopped being their son. Because love doesn't look like that. Love doesn't look like ruin. A few hours later, the venue manager called. Apparently, my parents had disputed their payment, claiming the event was fraudulent because the bride was unfaithful. They were trying to claw back the 30% they'd paid for the wedding. They'd weaponized their money, their lies, and their shame. Then the photographer messaged me. She'd been sorting through pictures and asked if I wanted the ones of the incident included in our album. I opened the files and saw Patricia standing with her phone in the air, Claire sobbing, and my father smirking in the background. That was when my stomach turned. I saved them anyway. I knew I'd need proof. Later that day, my brother Matt showed up at our apartment. He looked wrecked, dark circles, no sleep. He said, they're spinning it, Jake. They're telling everyone Claire cheated. My parents had already texted our extended family, my dad's dealership friends, even my old high school buddies, sending them the fake screenshots, spreading their story like gospel. Half the people believed them. The other half didn't know what to believe. Claire's phone started blowing up with messages from her relatives. Are you okay? What's going on? Is this true? She broke down, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. I realized then that ignoring them wasn't an option. I couldn't reason with people like Patricia and Howard. They'd mistaken my silence for weakness. So I started taking notes. I saved every voicemail, every text, every screenshot. I recorded the call when Patricia left a message saying, she's poisoned you, Jacob. She's making you hate us. Claire begged me to just block them. But I said, no, we're going to end this right. When I found out they'd contacted Claire's employer, calling her school to say she'd committed moral fraud, that's when I flipped the switch. I called the HR manager myself. She said my parents had told them Claire was under investigation for dishonesty and not safe around children. That was the final straw. That night, Claire sat at the kitchen table shaking. They're trying to ruin my life, she whispered. I said, then let's ruin theirs. I spent the next 2 days collecting everything. The fake screenshots, which I sent to a digital forensics friend who confirmed they were doctored. The recording of Patricia showing up at Claire's apartment, insulting her. The wedding photos that captured their stunt in real time. I called my grandparents, aunts, uncles, every single person who mattered in their social circle and told them everything. No filters, no emotion, just the facts. By day 3, the group chat was chaos. Half the family turned against Patricia and Howard. My grandfather texted me, "Your parents brought shame on this family. Handle it however you must." That was all I needed. I went cold, strategic, detached. I changed the locks on my apartment, removed them as emergency contacts, and started preparing statements for Claire's workplace, just in case. But the revenge itself needed to be bigger, louder. I wanted to hit them where it would hurt most. And for my parents, what hurt wasn't money. It was reputation. They lived for status, for control, for the illusion of perfection. So I made a plan to strip that away, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. What I didn't realize then was that my father had one more move planned. Something darker, colder, and far more personal than anything he'd done before. He wasn't trying to just destroy my marriage anymore. He wanted to destroy me. By the time I went into full damage control mode, my parents were already spiraling. Their social circle had started to fracture. My grandfather confronted Howard about the fake screenshots. Patricia was sick with stress, telling anyone who'd listen that I'd been brainwashed by that girl. But they weren't done. Not even close. Matt came by one night, looking like he'd aged 10 years. He dropped a manila envelope on my counter. "You need to see this," he said. Inside were printed emails. My dad's dealership letterhead on top. My father had used his company email to contact Claire's school district superintendent. The subject line read, "Concerned citizen regarding employee conduct." He'd written paragraphs about alleged fraud, inappropriate behavior with a male outside her marriage, and concerns about her moral integrity. He'd attached the fake screenshots. He'd signed it Howard Whitman, proud father trying to protect his son. If I hadn't seen it myself, I would have thought it was a parody. I sat there in stunned silence. My father wasn't just spreading gossip anymore. He'd crossed into defamation territory, using company resources to attack his own daughter-in-law. Matt said, he asked me to proofread it before he sent it. He said it was his last resort. I just stared at him. "And you didn't stop him?" "I tried," he said, voice cracking. "He told me I was either with him or against him. I don't think I'll ever forget that." My father had turned loyalty into a weapon. I forwarded the emails to myself, to Claire, to her HR department. I wanted every trace backed up. Then I started wondering, how far back did this obsession go? That's when Matt told me the second secret. The one that made everything snap into focus. He said, "This isn't the first time he's done this to someone." Apparently, 10 years ago, before I ever met Claire, my father had done something similar to his own sister's fiancé. My Aunt Laura had been engaged to a guy named Dennis. He wasn't wealthy, but he treated her well. Howard hated him, said he was a nobody. Weeks before their wedding, Dennis backed out suddenly. Everyone thought he got cold feet. Matt overheard Dad once, drunk at a family barbecue, bragging that he'd saved Laura by exposing what Dennis was really after. No one ever questioned it. But after that, Laura never dated again. When Matt told me that, I felt physically sick. It wasn't just about control. It was about destruction. Howard and Patricia thrived on power, deciding who was worthy, who wasn't, and watching their victims crumble when they took everything away. They'd done it before, and I was next in line. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed everything, the fake affair, the ruined wedding, the phone calls, the emails, and something in me hardened. I wasn't going to just protect Claire anymore. I was going to end them. I called my friend Ben, a lawyer who handled workplace harassment cases. Told him everything. He said, "You've got enough evidence to bury them." He wasn't exaggerating. Defamation, cyber harassment, workplace interference. I had recordings, screenshots, emails, witnesses. It was all there. But I wanted something more than legal consequences. I wanted humiliation. I wanted them to know what it felt like to lose everything they built their identity on. Howard's reputation at the dealership was his oxygen. Patricia's pride was her currency. They had spent decades manufacturing an image of power and respectability, and I was going to strip it away one truth at a time. I started making calls to the dealership's owner, to local business partners, even to members of their country club. I sent them the emails and recordings. I told them I didn't want revenge, just transparency. Ben drafted a cease and desist letter to the dealership, warning them about my father's misuse of company resources for personal harassment. But the biggest blow wasn't from me. It came from someone unexpected, my mother, because when the pressure started closing in, Patricia cracked first. And what she revealed next changed everything I thought I knew about why they did it. When Patricia called me that night, her voice sounded shredded. Not angry, not apologetic, terrified. She said, "Jacob, please stop this. You don't understand what you're doing." I told her, "You tried to ruin my wife's life. You don't get to play victim." But she kept talking, her words tumbling out like she was finally cracking under the weight of her own lies. "Your father isn't who you think he is," she said. I almost laughed. "No kidding." Then she whispered, "He wasn't trying to protect you from Claire. He was trying to protect himself." That shut me up. She told me to come to the house, said she had something to show me. Against every sane instinct, I went, because I needed to know what could possibly justify what they'd done. When I got there, the house felt different. The blinds were drawn. The lights were dim. Patricia looked pale, shaky, like she hadn't slept in days. She handed me a stack of folders, financial statements, old contracts, copies of dealership records. "Your father's been hiding things," she said. "Money things, illegal things." I started flipping through. Offshore accounts, fraudulent invoices, kickback transfers from the dealership to shell companies under fake names. My father's names. Millions of dollars over 15 years. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Patricia swallowed. "Because Claire's father, Tom, his company? He's a subcontractor for the city. Your father found out a year ago that Claire's family's business was being audited. He panicked. What does that have to do with us getting married?" She hesitated, then said it. The sentence that changed everything. "He thought if you married into their family, someone would find the connection." See, my father had been funneling money through Tom's construction company without Tom ever knowing. A subcontracting deal from years back, used as a front to hide dealership kickbacks. When Claire and I got serious, Howard realized the family he'd used for his dirty accounting might one day share his last name. If anyone ever looked too closely, it would all unravel. Patricia said, "He couldn't let that happen, so he had to make sure the wedding never did." I just stood there, staring at her. My father hadn't destroyed my wedding because he hated Claire. He'd done it because he was laundering money through her father's company. I said, "So all of this, all the lies, the fake affair, the humiliation, was to cover up his crimes?" Patricia nodded. "He told me it was for your protection. That if anyone found out, you'd be implicated too." That's when I realized the full horror of it. They weren't just controlling. They were criminals. And the Evan actor? Patricia admitted he'd been hired by Howard through a private investigator friend. She didn't know his real name. He'd been paid in cash. I asked her, "Why are you telling me this now?" She started crying. "Because he's unraveling, Jacob. He's paranoid. He thinks you're going to expose him. He said if you keep pushing, he'll make sure you and Claire go down with him." I left without another word. That night, I sat on my couch with those folders spread out on the table, feeling the sick, electric rage crawl up my spine. All those years, I thought my parents were just toxic and controlling. But they were worse, they were corrupt. They didn't try to save me. They tried to save themselves, even if it meant detonating my life. Howard had always loved control, but now I understood why he'd fought so hard to keep it. Because his entire image, his wealth, his marriage, everything was built on lies. And if he wanted a war, I was going to give him one. Not emotional this time. Not messy. Not yelling. Just cold, systematic destruction. After I left my parents' house with the folders, I didn't go anywhere dramatic. I sat in my car in Hartford and let everything land. The new shape of the problem felt almost simple once it had a name. Money laundering, company resources used for personal harassment. a pattern of destroying relationships to control outcomes. Once you see the thread, you can pull it. I started with what I had, evidence. The emails from Howard using dealership letterhead to contact Claire's superintendent. The doctored screenshots that a forensics friend had confirmed were fake. The recording of Patricia at Claire's apartment. The photographs from the reception that showed Patricia waving the phone like a trophy. The dealership invoices in my mom's handwriting that linked to shell companies. First move, legal. Ben the lawyer didn't need convincing. He sent targeted letters, cease and desist to my parents for harassment, a demand letter to the dealership about misuse of company email and possible embezzlement, and drafted material for a defamation suit if the lies continued. We gave them a deadline to stop contacting Claire, to issue written apologies, and to retract the fake screenshots to anyone they'd shared them with. Second move, community. Howard and Patricia's power lived in reputation. They wore it like armor, so I took it off them. I contacted people in their networks, clients at the dealership, his long-term business partners, the country club members I'd grown up around, neighbors, and a local journalist I trusted who had covered consumer fraud before. I sent concise, documented packets, emails, screenshots of the fake texts with annotations from the forensics report, copies of the dealership emails, and the wedding photos. No melodrama, just evidence and dates. People reacted the way people do when their worldview gets new data. Some dismissed it, some asked tough questions, and some started distancing themselves. The dealership owner called my dad in. That call wasn't hostile at first. It sounded like disappointment. Howard came home that night furious, but he wasn't angry with me, he was scared. The owner scheduled an internal review of the company books. Within a week, payroll and accounting flagged irregular transfers. The word audit started getting thrown around at family gatherings. Third move, protect Claire. Her HR now had everything. They sent a written statement clearing her and confirming no disciplinary action was warranted. They also told us they'd press for a protective order if the harassment continued. We filed for and received a temporary restraining order against my parents for contacting Claire's workplace and her family. That felt like pulling a safety cord when a hurricane hits. Then came the legal pressure that mattered. The attorney representing Tom, Claire's dad, drafted a letter outlining the fraudulent activity connected to the dealership and requested the state attorney general's office review the transfers. The local journalist ran a discreet piece about a high-profile local family involved in questionable transactions. No names at first, but enough to set tongues wagging. Within 2 weeks, auditors were at the dealership. The owner, who'd been a mentor to my father for years, told Howard he couldn't be associated with practices that risked the company. HR froze some roles. Board-level people asked for explanations. Howard's untouchable reputation got chipped in public. Patricia cracked before Howard. Her calls slowed, then stopped. She showed up at my grandmother's house one night and begged for a meeting. My grandmother shut the door. That was the last time I saw her in my life voluntarily. When the audit found enough smoke to warrant a deeper look, things accelerated. The dealership launched an internal probe, and the state opened inquiries into the shell payments. Facing potential criminal exposure, Howard tried to bargain, apologizing without admitting guilt, promising to step back from public roles. The owner and the board pushed for him to take a leave. He did grace under duress, but the leave became an investigation, and the investigation leaked. Friends stopped returning calls. The country club membership, once their social anchor, became awkward. Invitations stopped coming. The people who had smiled with them for decades now treated them like a liability. No one lost a limb. No dramatic court sentencing happened in cinematic fashion. But my parents lost the thing they valued above everything else: the appearance of control. They watched colleagues whisper. Their family fractured. My grandfather cut them off publicly. My dad almost lost his job. My mother spent months hiding from neighbors and old friends. Best part? Claire recovered. Her students kept hugging her in the hallway. Parents sent letters of support to the school. Our honeymoon got rescheduled. We rebuilt a life that didn't need their approval. I missed the guy I used to be, the son who wanted to keep peace. But what replaced him was someone who refused to be complicit in cruelty. I don't gloat in the small humiliations they now endure. I only feel steady when I think about what would have happened if I'd let them win. Claire's career destroyed, my name tied to their crimes, my soul hollowed out by obedience. They wanted me to thank them for saving me. Instead, I gave them what they feared most: exposure and the quiet, ordinary punishment of being ignored by everyone they'd used as mirrors. That's revenge without theatrics. Slow, legal, public, and permanent. If they ever call, I don't pick up. They wanted me to choose their version of family over my wife. I chose the one that shows up. And that choice? Priceless.